almost done, and I still have not been able to get my chat box to work, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. Like, it shows in my little side panel that shows chats, but it is not showing on the stream itself. Not promising. Alright, I'm going to close this. Don't know what else to do about that. I even tried just putting in a new chat source, and that didn't work either. Alright, this is almost done. Alright, everybody, this is Venus Brown. I am going to be starting to do readings of The Handmaid's Tale. I figured I would start this before the new spin-off show called The Testament starts. I have read both The Handmaid's Tale and The Testaments. They are not super long books. If you haven't read them, and if you haven't watched the TV show, the book basically goes over the first season. After that, there is certainly stuff that is pulled from the books in later seasons of The Handmaid's Tale show, but it mostly kind of goes on its own little path, which is still about the handmaid that the book is about, of Fred, Offred, or June, whichever you prefer to call her. Anyway, I am going to try to see if my chats are working in some fashion on my video. Hopefully, there's nothing on here that's going to create a bunch of feedback. I had a problem in the first place trying to go live. Like, it would not connect. It would not, as a matter of fact, the first one that I tried to do is on here scheduled for today at 12:07, which it shouldn't have been. It should have came on, but for some reason it didn't come on. For some reason it said I needed to log out and log back in, which I've done. That seems to have at least worked to allow me to live stream. Let me see if I can delete this one. It doesn't look like it. I'll have to try to do that later. Right now, I will go to this live stream. That seems to have at least worked to. Okay, so I see it in the chat box. I don't know, like, if I don't know if everybody else is going to see this. Let me log into a different YouTube. No, maybe I shouldn't do that. I don't know if I should do that. I don't know if I should do it because Streamlabs is logged into this YouTube. I don't want to, like, mess anything up. Anyway, make sure I don't have desktop going. Okay, let me try putting one more chat in. There should be a separate chat box on here. We'll see if it works. Because I have tried to set the chat up, and I've done all the other stuff. So let's see here. Putting one more chat in. There should be a separate chat box on here. Let's see if it works. I have tried to set the chat up. I've done all the other stuff. So okay, I got the noise notification. I see it is like really smashed down. Let me see if I can make this bigger. It's coming from the bottom. Noise notification. I see it is like really smashed down. Let me see if I can okay. Should I make it bigger? I mean, the box that I have for the chats is not very large. Okay, I'm gonna call that good enough. Anyway, I want to start reading the book, and I'm not going to read any of the chapter material yet. Today, I'm just introducing the book. I am going to go over some of the material that is at the very beginning of the book, and I have picked out, I think, a couple of articles. Let me go ahead and close this since it does seem to be working, or at least pause it. Okay. Anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to my reading section, which has me on it because I am on the wrong page. Here we go. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. I have a control box up here I will be trying to use to change pages rather than scroll through the pages. Alright, and it says, Offred is a handmaid in the Republic of Gilead. She may leave the home of the commander and his wife once a day to walk to food markets whose signs are now pictures instead of words, because women are no longer allowed to read. She must lie on her back once a month and pray that the commander makes her pregnant, because in an age of declining births, Offred and the other handmaids are valued only if their ovaries are viable. Offred can remember the years before, when she lived and made love with her husband, Luke, when she played with and protected her daughter, when she had a job, money of her own, and access to knowledge. But all of that is gone now. So it's what it says. This is a dystopian novel. It takes place as if the current modern situation got completely overturned by a despot religious regime. And they took over America, at least most of America, and they just start putting in these really horrific, extremely narrow-minded religious laws. And while they try to claim that this is all based on God's desire and the Bible and all of that, there's a lot of stuff that is taken out of context, that very badly cherry picks only certain parts of the Bible while ignoring all the context around the passages that they're using, and all kinds of stuff, which is a little bit of what I'm going to go over just in this discussion today, just talking about the stuff at the beginning of this. Let's see if there's anything else I want to talk about on here. So, the thing about women not being able to read, that, like, it's such an easy way for the leadership to take control of a population and make it so that women are unable to learn, to do things, to use their knowledge to do all kinds of things. And you can see how a policy like this, which was in place back in the slavery days, when most slaves were not allowed to read. They were not taught to read, and many of them could be punished for attempting to read, even if they did know how to read. There were certain places where they could read, but overall, it just wasn't allowed. And that really is an oppressive policy that really screws people over. The men are allowed to read. The male children, I believe, are allowed to read, but none of the females are allowed to read. At the very beginning, we have Serena is allowed to read until the regime really gets taken over, and then they even take her ability to read away. Anyway, let's see. And they talk about how the food markets that she has to walk to once or twice a day, no longer have words. The streets also no longer have words. they use pictures to represent what it is that they're trying to sell, and other information, but they do not use words at all. And pictures can be good for somebody who doesn't have the ability to read, but it really is a form of oppression to keep people from learning, to keep women from learning, to keep women from being able to gain knowledge, use that knowledge, all of that. Anyway, and then comes the probably one of the graphic parts of the book, but it is not the most graphic part of the book, where all of these handmaids are required once a month with their commander to lay down and let him screw them so that hopefully he can make a baby with them, since for some reason he was not able to make a baby with his wife. Now, the book does a good job at explaining that Gilead tries to make it sound like it's all on the women. The women are infertile. The women can't have babies. But they also make it clear that a lot of the men are actually infertile. Some of the women are able to get pregnant through other men, but not necessarily through the commanders who are trying to get them pregnant. So there are a variety of things that are done throughout the book and the show to try to get these females pregnant if they don't do it in a certain amount of time, because also they only have a scheduled amount of time to get pregnant before they take matters to maybe an even more severe punishment by sending them to what was it called? Sending them, I keep thinking Outback, but that's not what it was. Sending them to these areas that were intentionally separated from the rest of Gilead for cleanup because they have radiation toxicity. They have been destroyed through nuclear problems, through war, through all kinds of shit. They're supposed to clean it up. Some of them are supposed to also help with agriculture, shit like that. But if they are going to one of the places that is affected by radiation, they're basically being sentenced to slowly die through radiation poisoning. But like I said, not all of them go to one of the radioactive areas. Some of them do help with agriculture because they have to be able to stay alive. And not all of the world is willing to support Gilead because it's an oppressive regime that has completely taken over its country and harmed a lot of people in the process. Anyway, let's see. All right. And I want to make it clear that the handmaids and the people being sent to these radioactive climates are not the only people that are being oppressed. Even the wives who are married into these leadership positions. They're married to the commanders who are leaders within Gilead. They have access to money and other things that a lot of the females don't have, but they still have to stick to a lot of the really oppressive, awful regulations that exist in Gilead. And they have to support the system that is actively harming them and harming their kids and all of this and harming their marriages, frankly. So that kind of sucks. All right, let's go on to the next page. I think the next few pages don't have anything really to read, but we will go through them. So, Margaret Atwood, The Handmaid's Tale. I'm using this source because it was available freely. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like intentionally for like for like free for use books and stuff. All right, so let's the EPUB library, I believe. Anyway, let's go to the next page. Try not to make things take so long. Original title. And next one, 5. So this is who this is, like being not attributed to, but like the thanks for the book or whatever. Anyway, all right. So this is the main page that I'm going to be going over today. After today, I'll be reading directly from the book. Every once in a while, I might have something to say about it, but I'll mostly be reading and kind of giving my thoughts on the book, possibly on stuff that was from the show, especially if it coincides with the book. And sometimes when it contradicts the book. All right. So we have this passage. This is the first passage. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? Like, did I do this to you? This isn't my fault. It's God. Like, this is God's will. Like, I think God is, like, reprimanding you. Like, you're being punished for something by God, or it's God's decision, God's will, whatever. And she said, Behold my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. And they use this passage throughout the book and throughout the show to kind of justify a lot of the really horrible shit that they're doing to these handmaids, and to make it sound like they're actually like doing something that God wants, that this is for the improvement of Gilead and all of this stuff, and that this is God's will. But the other females and the other groups that they have sectioned the females off into do not approve of the handmaids. So as much as they try to make it sound like this is a honorable position given to them by God, and try to make it sound like this is something that they should be praised for and should be rewarded for, that doesn't actually happen most of the time. Anyway, I'm going to just go through each of these sections. I have an article for each of them, and then I think one of them I have a long article. I'm going to hold it off until the very end, which it goes with the ending passage. So if you don't want to wait and listen to a really long passage, which I may not be reading because it was so long. I read like half of it this morning, and it was taking so long that I was like, oh my God, like I don't want to read this much. So I pulled up some of my automatic readers on my computer and tried to get it to read, and it wasn't, like the one that goes with the browser wasn't working properly. It was claiming there was nothing there, even though when I first opened it up there was something there. But I have another couple readers on here, and I have it set to read from, I think it's called Natural Reader, which should be a little more natural sounding. The only problem is that it is a free version, and you only get that like good quality natural sounding voice for a set amount of time, and then once that time is over, then they switch you over to a more artificial robotic sounding voice. and I don't know how long they'll let me continue using that. I do have another one that can read by highlighting the passages and reading through it. Anyway, let's go to this first article. Okay, so this is about that passage. I wanted to go to kind of like the biblical passage itself and get more context because there's more than just what was read in this. I did read other passages before this because I wanted a better understanding of what was really going on between Jacob and Rachel and Leah and the handmaids. They're not handmaids on this, but they're servants. They're servants that were presented to these girls when they were married. Anyway, I did read ahead of this. I read this, and I think I read a little bit after it so I could get better understanding. And it also has a little passage up here, which I don't think that I have read the whole thing, but I've read some of it. Okay, so let's go. Genesis chapter 30. I'm not going to start in the part ahead. I may touch on it a little bit later, but not right now. And before I do that, I also want to see if I put a chat in here, if it's going to show up correctly. Actually, I see it already. Let me just, let me blow up this chat box a little bit. Looks like that is it. I'm going to move it up here. And then I'm going to, okay, hold on, just a sec. Stretch it out more so it will be bolder and stretch further out across the area that I wanted it to be in. Okay, I really think YouTube and Streamlabs need to do a better job at giving you options to change the sizing and things like that of these chats, and to make sure that they're going to appear appropriately if you're going to put them into the stream. Anyway, Genesis chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister, which is Leah. She said to Jacob, "Give me children or I shall die." Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" Then she said, "Here is my servant Bilhah. Go in to her, so that she may give birth on my behalf, that even I may have children through her." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went in to her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged me, and has also heard my voice and given me a son." Therefore she called his name Dan. And if you look at the notes for Dan, it says that this means something like he's judged me or something like that, or I don't remember exactly. But anyway, Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "With mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed." So she called his name Naphtali. So a lot of these names in here, the meanings of the names are supposed to go along with the passage. What the passage said, the reasoning for giving them the name is kind of like what the name is defined as, what it is about. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Then Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son, and Leah said, "Good fortune has come," so she called his name Gad, which is supposed to mean good fortune. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, and Leah said, "Happy am I, for women have called me happy." So she called his name Asher. In the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Mandrakes are supposed to be rare, so they're important. They are worth something. They are also supposed to be thought of as, I don't know if it's an aphrodisiac, but they are supposed to help women with infertility, according to their beliefs. I don't have any clue if there's any truth to that at all, but that's what I had read. But she said to her, "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" Rachel said, "Then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came home from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he lay with her that night, and God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, "God has given me my wages because I gave my servant to my husband." So she called his name Issachar. Okay, and this continues on for a while. Like, Jacob's having all these fucking kids through Rachel, through Leah, through both of their servants. And yeah, and like, he has his reasonings for doing this in this day and age. This is unfortunately too common. It's definitely not common today. Like, there are certain religions that practice this stuff, but for most nations it is illegal, and those religions that are practicing this are often breaking laws. Anyway, let's go ahead and read this section. What does Genesis chapter 30 mean? Genesis 30 is characterized by sibling conflict between Jacob's wives, the birth of many more children under the blessing of God, and Jacob eventually achieving great wealth after striking an unusual bargain with his father-in-law. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit. Chapter 29 described the treacherous circumstances of Jacob's marriage to a pair of sisters, Leah and Rachel, expecting to marry Rachel after 7 years of free labor. Jacob was stunned to find that his father-in-law had switched the sisters during the wedding night. The end result of this ploy was Jacob being married to 2 women, and with another 7 years of labor ahead of him for the second woman. In response to Jacob's understandable resentment of Leah, God allowed her to conceive sons, while Rachel remained barren. This chapter begins with a despondent Rachel declaring to Jacob, "Give me children or I shall die." Not only is she desperate to become a mother, she envies her sister Leah, who has already borne Jacob 4 sons. So before any of chapter 30 started, Leah had already given him 4 sons. This isn't a man without children. This isn't a man without lineal history or without the ability to continue his family line. Let's see. Okay, so not only is she Jacob loves Rachel more than Leah, but he rightly corrects her that God alone is the giver of children. This will become a theme of the chapter, one explored both in human and animal examples. Okay, let's see how long this is, because I don't want to go on too long reading this. In response to her fertility, Rachel follows the unfortunate example of Jacob's grandmother, Sarah. She gives her own servant woman to Jacob as a wife. By customs of the time, any children born to that servant would have been considered those of the wife. Bilhah soon bears Jacob 2 sons, Rachel's sons by proxy. Rachel names the boys for her circumstances and feelings at the time they were born. At the same time, Leah has stopped becoming pregnant, perhaps because of Rachel's influence. Perhaps because Rachel's influence is keeping Jacob from sleeping with her. She now follows Rachel's example and gives her servant woman to Jacob as a wife. Zilpah, in her return, gives birth to 2 sons. These belong to Leah by proxy, and she gives them happy names. None of these births, though, have ended the rivalry between Rachel and Leah. Both know that Rachel remains barren and that Leah remains unloved by Jacob. Their conflict flares to the surface when Leah's son, Reuben, brings home some rare mandrake plants he has found. Mandrakes were thought to help with arousal and infertility. When Rachel asks Leah for the plants, likely hoping they will help her to become pregnant, Leah lashes out that Rachel has taken her husband and now wants to take her mandrake plants. Rachel, apparently desperate, offers to give Leah 1 night sleeping with Jacob in exchange for the plants. Rachel apparently had great power over Jacob in the family dynamic. Yeah, I think I can read the rest of this without too much problem. Leah begins to bear children again, having another 2 boys and a girl, naming them all for God's provision in her life. Rachel, too, finally bears her first son, Joseph. Her name for him amounts to a prayer for another son to follow. So she has this first son, and the name is a prayer that she has another son. The narrative then shifts to inform us that Jacob's 14 years of service to Laban, his father-in-law, in exchange for his 2 wives, has come to an end. He demands that his father-in-law send him away so that he can return home to his own people. It's possible Laban retained some legal right to not release Jacob. In any case, Laban says plainly that he's become wealthy because of the Lord's blessings on Jacob. He asks Jacob to name new wages to continue working for him. Jacob's terms seem unusual. Instead of asking for a flat wage or even a percentage of Laban's flocks, Jacob asks to keep any newly born goats or lambs that are off-colored. Most of the sheep in Laban's flock are white, and most of the goats are black. A small percentage of the goats are speckled, striped, or spotted, and some sheep are black. After agreeing to Jacob's deal, Laban immediately removes all of the off-colored animals from the flock 3 days' journey away from the main group. It looks like Jacob's deal will go bust, but Jacob's got a plan. And because Laban thinks, well, like, this is a small percentage of my flock, maybe the black sheep and the spotted animals aren't thought of as valuable. Maybe they seem to be worth less to some people, but for that reason, he thinks he's getting a good deal. Let me continue reading. Instead, the Lord supernaturally blesses Jacob's unconventional efforts to cause white sheep to produce black lambs and black goats to produce mixed color offspring. While we aren't told yet, Jacob has apparently been informed in another dream that God intended to correct Laban's cheating of Jacob. So while this chapter only mentions Jacob's use of striped poles, there is no confusion that God and not the poles causes the change in the animal's color. In addition, Jacob breeds the flock to produce strong off-color animals for him and weak solid-colored animals for Laban. Jacob grows enormously wealthy. With the Lord's blessing, he has overcome Laban's scheme to keep him poor and dependent on his father-in-law. And that's the end of that. Okay, so, like I said, I read before and after these passages so I could get a good understanding, and I think it does a pretty good job. Like, he's traveling when he comes to Laban. Laban is a in-law, I believe. I don't remember exactly what the relation was, but they're related. And he falls in love with Rachel. Like, they make it sound like, oh, it's because of this rivalry and because he was married off to the wrong girl. But according to the biblical text, it definitely sounds like he was already in love with Rachel. He did not love Leah. Like, Leah wasn't even entering his mind, I don't think, for the most part, according to the passages. I am also, let me do something. I was going to read these on a different page. There. Okay. Now you can't see me, but you can see the pages. I don't know how easy that might be for you to read, but anyway, at least it's mostly on there. Anyway, he goes there. He offers to do 7 years of work to be married to his daughter. And the father-in-law takes his 7 years of freaking work and then marries him off to his youngest daughter, which is custom. But what bothers me, and should bother anybody about this, is that he knew the whole time that that was the custom. The younger female gets married first, then the older female. And because the younger one had not been married off yet, he was going to automatically have him marry her. And that should have been stated up front. Like, that should have been an open part of the discussion. Like, you're going to work for me for 7 years. I would think that you would at least be upfront with what that 7 years is actually giving you. And when you know damn well that the woman that he wants to marry is not the woman that you are going to provide him to marry, like, that's just fucked up. And that's exactly what happened. He does the 7 years of work. He gets married to Leah, who he does not love and he does not care about. And he's all upset. But basically, his father-in-law just makes another deal with him. You want to marry my other daughter? You have to work for me for another 7 years. So that's how this 14 years of labor to marry his 2 daughters comes about. Which to me is crazy. Like these marriages are supposed to be for the benefit of the man, supposedly at the time. They are supposed to bind families together. They are supposed to be used for making good business deals and for keeping their legacy strong and all of that. And this guy is like making this guy work for 7 years for each female and making him marry somebody that he doesn't want to marry and not fucking telling him until the time comes 7 years later after the work is already done. So yeah, that's just crazy in my mind, but I have definitely heard of other situations like this back in these times, so it's not unusual. It's not that unusual. The rivalry between Leah and Rachel, that I think is definitely created because of this situation. And I don't blame them. Like, I'd be fucking pissed too. Leah feels like she was the first to marry him. He is her husband, and he doesn't love her. He doesn't pay her any attention. He loves Rachel, but not her. This is a similar story to House of the Dragon. But whatever. Anyway, they and a lot of the passage, it just automatically puts it on God. This is God's decision. God is the reason that these females are not giving birth. God is the reason that these females are giving birth. God is the reason that all these things are happening. But I would say that the situation at hand is the reason. There's all kinds of reasons that these things might be happening, and just saying, oh, it's on God. It's totally on God. None of it's on me. None of it's on anybody else. It's all on God. I find that just lazy. It's just excuses. And you can blame everything on God and then not have to take any responsibility for anything. Anyway, and I already said about how Leah had already given him children before any of this happened. Any of this in chapter 30 happened. And they are using their maidservants. The maidservants were given to both of them, according to the Bible, when they got married, as servants to take care of them, which happens in royal families and apparently happens sometimes in not so royal families, but I don't think it's like a standard of procedure in every family. It's like if you're poor, you're not going to have anything like this, but if you're well off, you may get married and have a maidservant to help take care of you, help get you dressed and keep you clean and birth your children, shit like that. And when I say birth your children, I meant like help you when you're in labor giving birth. I don't mean giving birth to your children, but that is how they're taking it. And I find it like an awful thing to do to these servants. You're forcing them to have babies that are not recognized as their own. They're recognized as these other women's babies. And then they have less rights to like take care of their children, to parent their children and shit like that, because they're not considered their own children. And from what I remember, there is a variety of stuff that happens to these servants and their children because of this whole situation. But anyway, a lot of what happens in The Handmaid's Tale echoes these problems, echoes these challenges that you're hearing about in the biblical text and in the Bible study, and you will definitely hear about in Handmaid's Tale. All right, done with that. There is more that you can read. You can go to this if you want to. It's called Bible Ref. And I was going to put this in King James Version because I think the King James Version was the one that they were using in Handmaid's Tale for the most part. But I forgot. I had set it up on my laptop and not on my computer because I was originally going to do this while I was on vacation away, and I had my laptop and I didn't have my personal computer, so all these tabs were already opened up on my laptop and they already had everything all set up. But it's easier for me to use my personal computer. It is much better and much newer, and has much more power and much more space and all of that. It's just a much nicer thing. Okay, so let's go back to the reading screen. We're going to go back to The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, so next passage says, "But as to myself, having been wearied out for many years with offering vain, idle, visionary thoughts, and at length utterly despairing of success, I fortunately fell upon this proposal." Jonathan Swift, A Modest Proposal. Now, I don't know if any of you know what this proposal actually is. It's almost a joke. It's satirical, but it is a satirical joke to point out the ridiculousness of the situation and the ridiculousness of this proposal. The proposal itself is completely ridiculous to point out the ridiculousness of the situation that brings him about making this proposal. Anyway, let's go to this article, okay, and back over to the intermission screen. Okay. Short fiction by Jonathan Swift, A Modest Proposal. In 1729, Ireland was suffering from religious, political, and social strife, as well as a famine. The poor were extremely poor, often having to beg for food or money in the streets. Just what was Jonathan Swift's modest proposal to fix this problem? Eat the children. Seriously, in this inflammatory, satirical essay, Swift proposes that the starving poor of Ireland sell their excess children to the rich as food. Swift assumes a hyperbolically heartless tone that mocks those with negative opinions of the Irish poor, namely the Irish rich, politicians, and British officials. His aim was not to solve the problems in Ireland, but to expose the ridiculousness of quick fix schemes proposed by politicians and officials to relieve all of the social problems in Ireland. Through his biting sarcasm, Swift mocks these people and persuades readers to pity the Irish and hate the speaker. Swift's essay is an early example of Western satire that uses rhetorical devices such as example-based argumentation in order to criticize a social or political phenomenon. These tactics have been taken up by many authors after Swift and can even be seen as the basis for satirical news publications such as The Onion. Okay, now there was something else I wanted to go into. Let me see. Oh, okay, let me do this. I'm gonna copy this. Okay, paste. Let's see if it's in here. I think it is. Actually, I might have already left this open. Nope, I didn't. Okay, so A Modest Proposal is a 1729 satirical essay by Jonathan Swift that proposes the poor Irish should sell their children as food to the wealthy to solve poverty and overpopulation. By using a shocking, logical-sounding argument to highlight the horrific conditions and indifferences to the Irish poor, and to criticize the English landlords and the Irish government's inaction, it's a classic example of a Juvenalian satire using a modest and seemingly reasonable proposal to expose a deeply inhumane reality. Okay, let's see if there's anything else I wanted to read on here. Okay. I was hoping there would be a little bit of like how this applies to Handmaid's Tale, but I will say, in my honest opinion, the actions occurring in The Handmaid's Tale are so ridiculously over the top. They're so far out of context of a lot of the biblical passages that they're using, and they're so horrific for the population. They are not just bad for the females. They are bad for the males too. For all these males that are being married to these women and then not even like able to really have a legitimate romantic relationship with them. Like it shows both in the book and in the show, it shows how the fact that these women are no longer being used for procreation, so, and the handmaids are, so the relationship between the husband and wife are faltering and disintegrating. And the husband is no longer really giving the woman any attention. And I don't think that would necessarily happen with every single commander-wife relationship in Gilead, but it's definitely happening in the lead relationship. And you'll see in the other interactions with other husbands and wives in the Gilead regime that there are other problems in other relationships that exist because of this whole setup. It's frankly awful. It is very disturbing and traumatic for the handmaid, but it is also fucking horrible for the wife, and it is horrible for everybody else in this situation. Even the man. I don't want to give them too much credit because the commanders in this situation are the reason for the whole thing. They're the ones that came up with this. They're the ones that thought this was such a great idea. And they're the ones that implemented it and enforce it. I mean, they have soldiers that they create, that they make to force it, but to enforce it. But still, like, that is on them. But you can create policies and stuff that damage your own life and damage your own family, that mess things up for you. And that's exactly what they did. So, yeah, it's not just bad for the girls. It's bad for the boys, too. It's bad for the whole fucking regime. But they don't care. Much like a lot of the stuff going on in America right now is bad for everybody. But they don't care. They feel like they're getting what they want out of it. And the people that are complaining about it should just shut up and deal with it because they think that it's so great for them. But, yeah, some of us don't see it that way, obviously. Okay, anyway. Let's move on. This should be the last passage. I know, I'm going on for a while, but this is a live stream, so. Okay, we're going to go back to live scene. We're going to open up the book. No, not live scene, reading. We're going to open up the book. Okay. Last passage is a Sufi proverb, and a Sufi proverb, not Sophie, a Sufi proverb that says, "In the desert there is no sign that says, 'Thou shalt not eat stones.'" And everything that I read says that, oh God, like there's just so much argumentation over what this is really about and what it really means. And I have my own ideas, honestly. I'll talk about them later. But to start out, I'll just read what it says in the AI section. I'm not completely for all of this AI shit. I think it's gone completely out of control very, very quick. I think it is going to destroy jobs. I think it's probably already destroyed some jobs. And I think that it requires way too much energy and way too much power and way too many resources that we are not going to be able to keep up with unless something changes, unless they do something to make it better, to either make the system more efficient or make a lot more fucking power available and other things available that are frankly not. Like, this is not something that we can sustain. But they seem to be doing their own thing and not even consulting the people themselves as to what we really want, how we want this to be implemented, what we're willing to allow to go forth to continue this AI boom. And I would definitely call it an AI boom. But anyway, still, it is there. Before they were using these AI overviews, they basically would do almost the same thing. They would pull from the resources that they're using and put together a little blurb about what they found in the resources that they were using. And that's kind of what AI does. I don't know if one is any better or worse than the other when it comes to the results, but in both cases, if you really want to be careful, you need to actually check the sources that they're offering. Like, these are the sources. And the fact that they're using Quora, which is basically people giving their opinion as a source, as a major source, to me is a huge problem. I don't know how much anybody fucking checks on the answers that are given in Quora, but I know it's a question answer thing where people are free to freaking answer questions. You know, and you could say the same thing about Wikipedia, except there are actually people that are required to actually check over the articles in Wikipedia and make sure that they're valid. Make sure that they go along with the resources that are being quoted as the reason that they have provided that information. Make sure that the stuff is accurate and that it meets their standards. I don't know that that's happening with Quora. But anyway, let me read this because I am getting carried away with going on tangents. And if you've watched me for very long, you probably know I do have a tendency sometimes to go on tangents. And this is one of those, especially with these live streams, because I don't edit them. The Sufi, I keep saying Sufi and Sophie. The Sufi proverb, "In the desert there is no sign that says, 'Thou shalt not eat stones,' means that some things are so obviously wrong or undesirable, like eating stones in a desert, that they don't need explicit prohibition. It highlights common sense, inherent human understanding, and the futility of legislating the absurd, often appearing in Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale to contrast with extreme regulation," which is what's going on in Gilead. It suggests that true morality comes from inner knowing, not just external rules and regulations, and can imply that the laws often focus on controlling what people might want to do rather than obvious wrongs. And that came from Hyacinth the Review. Okay, interpretations and meanings. Common sense. Humans instinctively know not to do harmful or nonsensical things. Explicit laws aren't needed for basic survival or ethics, say Quora users and Brainscape users. And I would argue that this is not always true. I don't think it's saying that humans instinctively know how to not do harmful things. I think it's saying that there are some things that are so incredibly stupid, that are so ridiculous, that most people know intuitively that this is wrong. Like, you don't need any biblical text or any law or any parental figure or authority figure telling you that this is wrong to know, hey, we don't eat rocks. Now, there are certain extremely desperate situations that somebody may eat rocks because they've been so starved, because they're so lacking in nutrition, they're so lacking in food, they might do something like that seems completely absurd to everybody else. And I think that also is how this fits into the Gilead pretext. That when people are that desperate, sometimes they do horrific, ridiculous shit that nobody would do because it's so freaking bad. Because they're so freaking desperate. All right, and that's on multiple sides within The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, so let's see. Critique of authority. It can satirize overly restricted societies like the Gilead Society and the Handmaid's Tale that try to regulate everything, even basic human impulses, argue Quora users and Seneca. Seneca I looked at, and the article on it was pretty small, so I didn't care to use it. But yeah, like you're so massively restricting common things that people need to live a decent life, to be free, to be able to make their own decisions, all of that, and they basically regulated all that away. So you're not allowed to really make your own decisions. You are not allowed freedom. You have to do every single little fucking ridiculous thing. And the sexuality and morality regulations. This is a problem I have with our current situation that I've had my entire life. The amount of morality and sexuality regulations in this country and throughout the world, to me, are ridiculous. Like, the government should not be regulating our sex outside of certain things. Like, yes, pedophilia is disgusting and horrible and deplorable. It shouldn't happen. Rape is horrible and deplorable. It shouldn't happen. Unfortunately, it does, because it's been normalized in this world for far too long. Things like that, yes, they need some law put in, because guess what? Even if it's completely ridiculous, sometimes people will do it. And that's another thing I have with this saying, trying to say, oh, like, everybody knows, like, not to do things that are harmful or nonsensical. Intuitively, they don't need a law or regulation. But we also know that people do horrible, awful, ridiculous things, and sometimes they actually do need lessons and regulation and laws and stuff like that to stop themselves from doing it. And it's only going to stop the honest. It's not going to stop the people that aren't honest and don't care about the law. But it will at least stop most of the people that actually do care to follow the law, or at least have, like, people generally on their side. Anyway, let's get to the next thing. Inner morality. It points to a deeper mystical understanding, the Sufi tradition, which is why this was a passage in the first place, was because of the Sufi tradition, where spiritual guidance supersedes external rules. And it's Seneca and the University of New Brunswick. So I think that's important, like an important thing to keep in mind is it's not just pointing out the ridiculousness of things. It is also about Sufi religions and Sufi spirituality and Sufi tradition. They believe that you try to better yourself, that you try to better the world by bettering yourself, that kind of thing. You need to look inward to fix your own self rather than focusing on everybody else and everything else and trying to follow these extremely rigid rules, which is also very different than some other Islamic teachings. So the Sufi Islam, why can't I think of the word? Islamic Sufis tend to be very different from a lot of other Islamic religions or Islamic denominations, especially the more conservative literal translation ones. Same as Christians. Christians like to excuse themselves and their religion from the stuff that goes on in the Islamic religion, but they're not really better. Like, Christians in the extreme, when they follow literal translations, extremely conservative policies that they pull from the Bible, haven't been any better really than Islamic traditions, especially in the past. And you could say, oh, well, they're not like that anymore. Maybe, but still, like, I find too many Christians excuse themselves and excuse their biblical policies as being better when really the Quran, the text in the Quran came from the same freaking place. You're trying to say they mean different things and say different things, but I've read some of it. I haven't read all of it, and a lot of it is directly from the Bible. So, anyway, let's see. Human nature, it suggests that prohibitions are often about controlling desires, and we don't need to ban things that no one would want to do anyway. And that's exactly what we do. I would say Gilead has like made a bunch of policies that no one would want to do anyway, but they made them policies, so now everybody's required to do them, which just creates a whole nother line of problems. But we do that sometimes ourselves too, in our own country and in our own legislation. All right, so as I said, this is going to be long. I am going to try to let the natural reader read it for me, and especially I'm like getting a dry throat anyway, so I really do not want to have to read this whole thing. I find it very long, but it is important, and it does talk about those Sufi traditions, why they are important to the passage, and how they apply to The Handmaid's Tale. Let me put this on intermission. All right. And we'll go ahead and play this. And hopefully it will play most of it in the nice voice and not go to the robotic voice. But I kind of doubt it. Oh. Hold on. I don't have my speaker on. It automatically shuts off after a while, and apparently I've been running my mouth way too long. While I am at it, I see this chat box also needs to be blown up. Let's see. I want to make that higher. Woo. Okay. And a little bit wider. Okay. And now. Alright. It goes a little outside my box, but at least it can be read. Alright. Now, let's go ahead and start this.
In the desert there is no sign that says, "Thou shalt not eat stones." Sufi proverb. Both book reviews and literary criticism following the publication of Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale emphasize its dystopic nature, its satire of contemporary morals and politics. Indeed, even the paperback book jacket calls for political action. The Playboy Review, for example, tells readers to contribute to their favorite liberal cause, while the Newsday excerpt refers to the book's argument, as though the novel were a persuasive treatise instead of a work of imaginative prose. Similarly, critics such as Amin Malik, Rian Gardem, Nischik, and Roberta Rubinstein discuss the book's anti-utopian slant and place it within the contemporary dystopian tradition. Largely overlooked
I find it
in
a
these
little
recent
amusing that they
however,
cited
is the
Playboy,
narrative frame which
but
Atwood
whatever.
uses to begin her novel, consisting of 2 dedications and 3 epigrams. While Linda W. Wagner Martin has identified the people to whom the book is dedicated as Perry Miller, the Puritan scholar, and Mary Webster, an ancestor of Atwood who was tried for witchcraft and who curiously survived her execution. Wager Martin has
I
neglected to
did hear
consider the
about
relevance
that
of the second set of
witchcrafting.
citations
I
which
think I would like
preface
to
the main
read up
text.
on it at some
Taken
point.
collectively, the three epigrams establish an ideological boundary for the novel in setting up contrasting worldviews. The first, taken from the Book of Genesis, gives a biblical foundation for the society Atwood envisions in her novel one, in which handmaids function as surrogate mothers to infertile women.
Easily recognizable to most Westerners, this epigram is manifested
the
within both the characters and plot of Atwood's work.
Computer voice. Let me see if I can
Offred, the
change
narrator,
it.
is a
It's very interesting because I am pretty sure that's the same selection I had before. So I doubt that it'll let me change it. But let's try this.
Offred, the narrator, is equivalent to the maid Bilhah,
Nah.
just as Serena Joy is equivalent to the sterile Rachel. Similarly, the second epigram, taken from Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal, is also readily understood. Just as Swift satirically overstated his case against neglectful landowners and immoral Irish tenants by calling for the cannibalization of children as a cure-all for social illness, Atwood caricatures both American Puritanism and the moral majority by rendering literal what is currently only theoretical in American fundamentalism. In addition, just as Swift borrows the idea about cannibalism from his American friend, the Canadian Atwood suggests that her American neighbor to the south has invented the New Gilead as a prototypical model society on which others could be based. It is the third epigram, the one taken from the Sufi tradition, that is, however, the most enigmatic of the three literary references which Atwood evokes to start her novel. Since most Westerners are unfamiliar with the tradition from which this proverb springs, they are likely to underestimate its importance or use within the novel. For example, Lucy Fribert remarks on its simplicity and argues that the proverb's meaning is that, on the most basic level of survival, human beings instinctively know what to do and what to avoid. It suggests the corollary that authorities should avoid unnecessary regulation, without explaining exactly how she arrives at her conclusions. In her paragraph of analysis, she neglects much of the proverb's elusiveness, incorrectly assuming that its meaning is readily apparent or self-evident. In contrast, I feel that the proverb's message is complex in nature, hiding in its core a unified...
I'm going to pause this and scroll up. Okay, and I would try to use my other reader, but I don't think it really sounds that much better or any better than the one that it's using, so I'll just let it continue.
In contrast, I feel that the proverb's message is complex in nature, hiding in its core a unifying element which is echoed throughout the Handmaid's Tale in the words and actions of Offred, the narrator. Beneath its apparent simplicity lurks a complex alternative vision of reality, compared to the Judeo-Christian tradition which Atwood satirically mocks in her novel. To understand the epigram's importance, however, it is necessary to place it within the context of Sufi mysticism, for only then can readers see the far-ranging implications of its import within the Handmaid's Tale. Thus, I shall briefly summarize certain aspects of the Sufi tradition, demonstrating how Atwood exemplifies them through her novel's heroine, who becomes a Sufi spokesperson who validates inward spirituality and truth rather than revealed doctrine. Following that, I shall examine the proverb's meaning in terms of its elusiveness, demonstrating that the stones to which the proverb refers are metaphorical. They refer to the many non-nutritional elements of institutional Christianity which leave unfed its practitioners. Furthermore, I shall demonstrate how these unfed hungers lead to sinfulness and wrongdoing. Like all other major religions which have existed for centuries, the history of Sufism is complicated, especially since there are several differing types of Sufism in both theory and practice. The Hutchinson Encyclopedia of Living Faiths notes, since Sufism is essentially the pursuit of spiritual experience by bodily discipline and mystical intuition, it is peculiarly resistant to any kind of systematic treatment. However, since Atwood is not interested in promoting a particular version of Sufism in her novel, but rather in adopting some of its tenets to underline her own satire, it is sufficient to deal with it broadly. The term Sufism has been identified as coming from the monastic tradition of wearing garments of wool, suf, which early Islamic mystics did, starting perhaps as early as the 7th
Which I
century.
did not know what that was. I did
Essentially
not know
ascetic,
it was about
the first
wearing
practitioners
garments
devoted
of wool,
themselves to interior
which I find
spiritual
very
development
itchy.
and largely rejected a theological approach to Islamic ideas, preferring more individual responses to the divine and religious observance. As the Encyclopedia of Religion notes in its lengthy discussion of Sufism, the emphasis among Sufis has always been on interiority or private mystical union with God. Sometimes at the expense of political or social action, the goal of every Muslim mystic is to recapture this experience of loving intimacy with the Lord of the worlds. Hence, proponents experimented with many rituals such as controlled breathing, frenzied dancing, and intoxication, commonplace among mystics but largely neglected by more orthodox believers. As a result of these elements, serious misunderstandings have occurred, especially from modern Islamics of differing sects unfamiliar with their use and tradition. As the Encyclopedia of Religion notes, the very premise on which Sufism is based, namely union with God, is rejected as un-Islamic. We see today in many of the most vibrant Islamic revivalist movements a similar tendency to espouse the most puritanical forms of literalist religion. In such a world, Sufism has little place. Despite its rejection by more conservative Islamics, the Sufi tradition has flourished, yet, as a result of the personalism of spiritual growth, its history is one of individual teachers and their followers rather than a systematic theory of ideas. In addition, rather than developing a coherent canon of religious instruction, Sufi doctrine was promulgated by various literary means, especially through the epigram, the aphorism, sermons, letters, and the like. Thus, even a modem Sufi text, The Way of the Sufi by Eldrais Shah, 1969, is a compilation of sayings of the masters and group recitals, with very little commentary or explanation attached. In Mystical Dimensions of Islam, a noted expert on Sufism, Anne-Marie Schimmel, explains that these proverbial sayings are often paradoxes resulting from wordplay in the original language. A tendency to enjoy the infinite possibility.
Let's pause this again and scroll some more. And you see what I mean by how long it is? Like, it's already been reading for quite a while. 3 pages, I think, or this is the 3rd page, I think. And we're not even halfway through, so.
A tendency to enjoy the infinite possibilities of the language has greatly influenced the style of Arabic poets and prose writers. And in many sayings of the Sufis one can detect a similar joy in linguistic play. The author indulges in deriving different meanings from one root, he loves rhymes and strong rhythmical patterns. Acknowledging that much of this wordplay is lost in translation, Schimmel points out that the traditional Sufi attitude is to see even the simplest proverb as a complex expression of faith despite its apparent simplicity of form. It is meant to be seen as rich in elusiveness and import. She notes that the titles of Sufi books are particularly representative of the practice of encapsulating enormous meaning into a short phrase. The titles allude to mystical states, to technical expressions, and often contain in themselves a whole spiritual program. That Atwood's Handmaid is an ascetic, albeit not one by choice, is apparent from the very start of the novel. Forced to live in a monastic hermit's cell which is like that of a nunnery, 10, Offred admits that nothing takes place in the bed but sleep, demonstrating the limitations of both her sexual activity and personal freedom. In addition to living in what she calls reduced circumstances, she must also wear a red habit made of wool during the winter, 69. Furthermore, she practices controlled breathing during which she hears the sound of my own heart, opening and closing, opening and closing, opening, 190, during her attempts to sort out the complexity of life before her. Thus, given the etymology of the word Sufi, Offred can readily be regarded as one of its practitioners, at least nominally, since she possesses the exterior form and practices a ritual associated with the tradition. More important than her outward appearance, however, is Offred's attitude to the events that surround her. In 2 important respects, she demonstrates a Sufi perspective, one, in her inwardness. Her attempts to discover and evaluate her own feelings and psychological realities despite the teachings and proclamations of the society that denies them and which refuses to accept their legitimacy, and 2, in her need to express that inwardness through language games that appear to be simple or perhaps clever, but which actually reveal complex networks of feelings and ideas. Serving as a spiritual shorthand, her games reveal her attempts at sorting out her own experiences into a coherent system of belief and ethical action. The world which surrounds Zero F. Fred is that of Christian fundamentalism based on biblical authority. So pervasive is the influence that even the cars which she describes have biblical Old Testament elusiveness. The whirlwind, the chariot, the behemoth, 23, all possess prestige. Not only associated with their use as status symbols by their owners of various ranks, but also indicative of their owners' spiritual authority. Thus, something as innocent as a means of transportation becomes a spiritual marker capable of hidden messages. Similarly, the shop names which identify the products for sale have New Testament elusiveness. Offred trades at the lilies of the field, 33, the milk and honey, 34, and the all-flesh, 36. Recalling to mind Christian parables and their rich tradition of instruction based on simple narratives. Correspondingly, the fact that these stores are frequently empty of good attests to the fundamental emptiness of Christianity. Yet Offred cannot readily accept this orthodoxy, despite its pervasiveness. Over and over again she announces her need to make distinctions between what she is supposed to feel and what she does feel about her society, 45-44. And, instead of looking for confirmation of the social order through its teachings or its legislators, she deliberately looks inward to her own self as the authority for values and ethical choice. She establishes her need for a clarity of vision, her unwillingness to accept blindly the pronouncements.
Okay, all right, so let's scroll again. So I found it amusing, the names of the stores and stuff in Gilead. All flesh, loaves and fishes, shit like that. When I was on Christmas vacation this time, I actually saw a store called Loaves and Fishes, and I was like, oh my god, straight from The Handmaid's Tale. How horrible. I wonder if they even realized that they did that, or if they did it on purpose. Goodness. Okay, anyway, let's continue on.
She establishes her need for a clarity of vision, her unwillingness to accept blindly the pronouncements around her. As a result, she minutely examines her surroundings looking for some understanding of meaning and purpose, 68. Seeing the world, in gasps,
and I would
40,
say that
she
explanation they
the
gave, let me pause this for a minute, that explanation they gave of how she looks inward within herself for moral clarity and stuff like that, does kind of explain some of the issues people have with June throughout the series on the TV show. Being selfish, making decisions that serve herself and harm others, things like that. And that's not necessarily going to do that, but I think in desperate situations like she's in, where she is trying to break free from a regime that is keeping her captive and keeping others captive, in the first place, in order to break free, you're going to have to do things that are dangerous, selfish, and could harm other people. But also, if you are constantly looking inward and you are looking to yourself for moral clarity and stuff like that, especially in desperate situations like that, that can be very hard. Like, you are between a rock and a hard place, and what seems right to you may be very wrong to other people. It may be very wrong for other people, but, when there's fucking desperation on all sides, sometimes you're gonna do shit that seems morally ambiguous or morally wrong just to get yourself to a better position. But anyway, that's me. I sometimes will defend June for doing some of the awful shit she did because she was in a really bad position. And people do sometimes really bad stuff in desperate situations. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue.
Seeing the world, in gasps, 40, she recognizes the need for perspective, 185, and tells the commander that she craves knowledge of whatever there is to know, 243. To Offred, the world is perpetually one of mysteries needing uncovering. Something has been shown to me, but what is it? 65. In addition, she sees the night as her time out for meditation and reflection, 49, and she makes deliberate choices about how to spend it. Where should I go? She asks. This question is directed to her inner space since she is unable to make those choices regarding her physical being. Thus night becomes a paradox, nominally her enforced time of repose and rest, it becomes her most active time, a time for ethical choices and understanding. The importance of which is underscored by the novel's division since 8 of the 15 chapters take place then. The significance of night is central to the Sufi tradition for, as William Stoddard explains in Sufism, the mystical doctrines and methods of Islam. Night has traditionally been regarded as a woman named Layla who is the goal of all spiritual journeys. He notes, in this symbolism Layla and Hakika, divine reality, are one. Thus, contemplation of night and the celestial bodies of the moon and stars is an important undertaking. As a result, in pursuit of her spiritual understanding of night, Offred periodically examines those topics germane to this exploration: piety, prayer, and faith. Never systematic in her examination, again like the Sufis who look for knowledge of the divine in obscure places and events, she nonetheless comes to know and reveal her own truth regarding these matters. For example, she initially distrusts Ofglin for demonstrating false piety. Offred notes, I resent this grace of hers. I resent her meek head, bowed as if into a heavy wind. But there is no wind, 58. Offred realizes that the pose of meekness is unnatural and an affectation. It is an inappropriate response to the conditions of life. Similarly, Offred challenges the purpose of the Soul Scrolls, admitting that she cannot accept that God listens to them, 217. Yet in rejecting the conventionalities of the Christian religion, especially those aspects that promote an abasement of womanliness, 251, Offred does not become an atheist. Rather, she affirms her own sense of prayer and sacredness. She prays, where I am, sitting by the window, looking out through the curtain at the empty garden. I don't even close my eyes. Out there or inside my head, it's an equal darkness. Or light, 251. Composing her own version of the Lord's Prayer, she adds, My God, who art in the kingdom of heaven, which is within. I wish you would tell me your name, the real one I mean. I have enough daily bread, so I won't waste time on that. It isn't the main problem. The problem is getting it down without choking on it. 251 to 252. Here, in her unorthodoxy, Offred reveals her own sense of prayer, one that would be regarded as heretical by her captors.
Choking on it.
Likewise, Offred has periodically commented on the faith left behind in her room in the petite point cushion. Accepting that the cushion is an enigma over which she can spend minutes, tens of minutes, running my eyes over the print, 75, she introduces a multiplicity of meanings in that utterance. For example, her statement can mean her realization that her captors have indeed left their worn faith behind in creating their political system, just as another pure...
Okay, let's scroll again. I think it's getting close to where I stopped, because like I said, I hadn't even gotten halfway through, and it was just going on and on and on, so I stopped reading. Anyway, let's continue on.
For example, her statement can mean her realization that her captors have indeed left their worn faith behind in creating their political system, just as another Puritan, Hawthorne's Goodman Brown.
Let me pause again. I
left behind
found it interesting that they talked about the connection with night and Sufism, but they didn't bring up her connection to water, because she said that when she goes in the water, that's like when she thinks of her kid, and that just struck me as like an important thing. Like at night she does some thinking, but night also was when a lot of really horrible things were happening, but when she was in the water, I don't know, it was like she could contemplate and reflect and remember things from when things were good, when she was with her kid. Let me close this thing. Alright, and let me start playing again.
Left behind his own faith when he ventured into the forest. Or, indeed, her captors overlooked faith in building their society. In their pursuit of righteousness, they
captors
failed to see the reality for what it
faith
was, mistaking the
in
cushion
building
for a
their
decorative
society.
ornament. They neglected to read it, accepting only its utility rather than its underlying spiritual importance. Symbolically, they have created an entire ethical system based on biblical truth, while neglecting to recognize other authentic expressions of spirituality. For example, Offred asks of the other cushions, hope and charity, where have they been stowed? 140, symbolically attesting to their absence in the New Gilead. Then again, her
absence
captors
of
may have
hope and
forgotten that
charity
Offred could read and thus come to a private
and
understanding of faith's
overlooking
import.
of faith.
Here they appear forgetful, and, in their forgetfulness, they are contemptuous of her ability to understand the elusiveness of language. Thus, Offred possesses an unorthodox religious understanding, certainly equivalent to the Sufi attitude to fundamental Islamic doctrines. By substituting her own insights for those of revealed religion, she subverts its claims and authorities, especially when she notes at the bloody salvaging that faith cushions are notably absent, 351. Thus, a simple decorative ornament becomes an elusive spiritual proverb. Similarly, like the Sufis, Offred expresses her unorthodoxy through language play, through simple statements masking complex understanding. For example, early in the novel she reveals inadequacies of patriarchal control which has not created female equivalents for certain relationships. She notes that while fraternize means to behave like a brother, there was no corresponding word that meant to behave like a sister, 15. Offred recognizes that the discursive language of patriarchy creates its own realities by failing to name certain bonds
I wonder
of
if
effectiveness
when
that
she
exist
was
between
talking
women.
about that, if she talked
In addition,
about
Offred senses that
sororities.
orthodox understanding is
like
flawed
what a
since it holds only
sorority
limited
means.
understanding of words, and symbolically, the realities that stand behind them. For example, in listing many of the meanings of the word job, she quickly moves from job, meaning an occupation, to the Book of Job, 224. Demonstrating that patriarchy has also conflated the two by associating one's occupation with patience and the virtues which the biblical Job demonstrated while enduring his divine punishments. Through a short language game, Offred reveals the complex relationships that exist between language and power and how entire value systems can result from playing with these features. That Offred sees the power of language is best demonstrated in her strategies when playing the illicit game of Scrabble with the commander, who presumptuously inquires of her if she knows how to play. Relying on her past association with the game, she remarks that, "This is freedom, and I blink of it," 180. By this she means not only the momentary freedom she is enjoying as she plays the game, but also the ultimate freedom that language play allows, the power to shape reality. Furthermore, her pun on "I blink" alludes to the eyes, the ever-present totalitarian spies who outlaw most experiences except those in keeping with their rigid notions of law and order. For her to play at freedom, the eyes must blink. Furthermore, when she and the commander make up nonsense words, she demonstrates both her competency at language formation and, more importantly, her central understanding of language empowerment. Thus, in her inwardness and language play, Atwood resembles in spirit the Sufi tradition. Again, this is evident in the complex ways in which she refers to the Latin inscription which she finds in her closet. Sometimes a prayer, I don't know what it means, but it sounds right, and will have to do, because I don't know what else I can say to God, 117. At other times it is merely an entreaty to the commander, not a prayer.
Okay, let's scroll some more. Whoops. Alright.
Sometimes a prayer, I don't know what it means, but it sounds right, and will have to do, because I don't know what else I can say to God, 117. At other times it is merely an entreaty to the commander, not a prayer. Creating a paradox, Offred demonstrates the over-changing realities around her. Another significant way in which the Sufi tradition differs from the Judeo-Christian is that it has allowed for the expression of women's spiritual leadership and guidance, validating the experiences of feminine members. Unlike Jewish and Christian religions, which are religions of the Father, in many senses, the Sufi tradition has honored and celebrated women saints as teachers from early on. As Margaret Smith demonstrates, one of the central figures of early Sufism was Rabia, who is credited with prayers and poems representing some of the earliest aesthetic expressions of
I
mystical
don't know. I could have
experience in
sworn
Islam.
there are passages
In
in
describing the equality between the
Jewish
sexes in
and
Sufism, Smith
Christian
notes,
religious texts that
so the title of saint was bestowed upon women equally with men,
that
and
talk
since Islam
of
has
God
no
as
order of
being
priesthood
like
and no priestly caste, there was
beyond
nothing to
sex,
prevent a woman from reaching
beyond
the highest
gender,
religious
like,
rank in the hierarchy of Muslim saints.
encompassing multiple
In
genders
qualifying
and
Smith's 1928
all of
statement,
that.
Schimmel notes that the
But
ascetic
I
aversion
think
to
because
women
the
in all
Bible is
monastic
written
and
by
ascetic
men,
traditions,
it
where woman is
heavily
seen as threatening to
focuses
man's spiritual
on
purity, has
masculine
contributed to the
language
degradation
and
of women in
masculine
most
rights
primitive
and
societies.
masculine ideas.
However, women like Rabia, who teach humankind the secret of unconditional love of God, have always held a very special place in religion and society. Even in our day, we find mystical women leaders in Islam, whose influence extends far beyond the small circle of her closest disciples. Just as Offred uses her version of Sufi mysticism in her attempt to understand and give a construction to the world around her, she looks to her schoolgirl friend Moira as a saint from whom to gain understanding.
A saint?
Rejecting the established womanly role models of Serena Joy, the aunts, and even her mother, Offred projects onto Moira many virtues such as bravery, daring, and, most importantly, sexual autonomy. For it is Moira's
Right, which isn't
lesbianism which sets her
necessarily
apart from Offred
characteristics
most
of a
dramatically.
saint.
By refusing to accept heterosexual inequality and the romanticized views of falling in love, Moira remains chaste even as she nightly surrenders her body at Jezebel's. At the very start of the novel, Offred conjures her remembrance of Moira and associates Moira with goodness, 49. Later, Offred remarks that Moira's story is essentially a better 166, meaning in both interest and resolution. From recollections of Moira, Offred repeatedly draws inspiration and guidance. For example, she remarks that Moira's presence made her feel safer, 92, and admits that their clandestine conversations in the bathroom of the Leah and Rachel Center made her feel ridiculously happy, 95. Offred admires Moira's gutsiness, especially regarding a plan for escape, 115, whereas Offred counsels safety and prudence, Moira tells her not to worry. To which Offred admits her own emotional needs. I couldn't stand the thought of her not being here with me. For me, 116. Here Offred acknowledges that Moira's very existence subverts the totalitarianist regime. In a fitting tribute to her friend, Offred concludes,
Okay, before I continue on, I want to say that the stuff that she's saying about Moira, like the very fact that you are in a situation like that, I think they specifically talked about when they were in the Leah and Rachel Center, like you're in a oppressive regime, you were just kidnapped, your kid was just taken from you, and you're in this freaking facility, and lo and behold, you find out that your best friend is there too. Like, no matter what kind of friend it is, I would think that would be like, that would feel very positive. It would make you feel very happy that in the midst of all this devastation and you being in this awful, horrific situation, that your friend is there. Like, you might also be unhappy that your friend is going through this also, but you at least have somebody to connect to that you knew from before. So, anyway, let's scroll again. And, I forgot about that. Hold on, people. Hello?
Candy, I just was checking if you're almost for the appointment for Galen's 2 o'clock today.
I am not. I completely forgot about it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that everything is okay. I thought maybe just running a few minutes late, but then I started thinking, oh, gee, God forbid something happened. So, well, I'm glad you forgot, and it wasn't something more than that. So, let me just check your schedule with the next appointment I have.
she was lava beneath the crust of daily life. In the light of Moira, the aunts were less fearsome and more absurd. Their power had a flaw to it. They could be shanghaied in toilets. The audacity was what we liked. 172. Throughout the novel, Moira remains with Offred through her recollections and functions as her conscience, offering alternative understandings and values to the institutional ones. For example, while Offred is waiting to enter Jezebel's, she questions her presentability, outfitted as she is in worn-out clothes and lacking proper makeup. In reaction to her concern, Moira, though absent, calls Offred an idiot 303, showing the extent to which Offred has internalized Moira's presence, calling it forth as both balm and vinegar at the appropriate times. When Offred eventually sees that Moira has not truly escaped, despite the valiant efforts of her associates, Offred finally admits to the burden of responsibility that she has given her friend. Offred says that she is frightened at hearing the lack of volition in Moira's voice and announces, "And how can I expect her to go on, with my idea of her courage, live it through, act it out, when I myself do not? I don't want her to be like me, 324. Yet even in her superficial defeat at the hands of the commanders, Moira functions as a spiritual guide to Offred. Just as the earlier Islamic saint had functioned as a role model to Islamic women, Moira becomes the saint of the Handmaid's Tale. Similarly, just as Rabia preferred celibacy to the expected sexual roles of maid and mother, Moira offers a feminist alternative. In her sexual interactions with women, she subverts the inequalities of heterosexuality. Thus, Sufism has offered Offred both an alternative perspective as well as a means of articulating her newfound understanding. In her simple proverb-like statements, she utters a new theology, one that contrasts dramatically with the world of the commanders. In creating this spiritual text, Offred tells us that she creates litanies to compose herself, 140. Just as liturgical litanies reveal different aspects of a subject, they gather their force from accumulated utterances. For example, a typical litany to the Virgin Mother praises her by all the different names by which she is known: Mother of God, Blessed Virgin Mary, Seat of Wisdom, etc., while
And I
gathering
am
emotional and
sorry about
spiritual
the sound
force
of
through the
that
recognition of the
generator
various
out
aspects
there.
of the
I
same
can't really do
subject and the
anything about it.
repetition of
It's
response
the
by the congregation.
neighbors, and unless I recorded
Similarly,
this and
Offred
edited it,
periodically presents us with a
I
litany
wouldn't be able
of
to really
hunger
do anything
that reveals
to
aspects of human need and which
take
gathers
it
force as
off
the
the
individual
track.
statements accumulate throughout the novel. Offred's litany of hunger extends from her need for touch, 14, her desire for small goals that can be easily attained, 17. Her wanting of treacherous smells associated with kitchens from her past to her craving for face cream while being held and told my name, 125. Through her litany, especially of those things connected with memory and selfhood, she reveals simple but desperate needs that her culture has neglected to feed. As with all litanies, the force of her utterances accumulate and gather more significance collectively than they would have had individually. Correspondingly, through the use of food imagery, Atwood reveals that modem Christianity offers stones in its desert as nourishment to these various needs, actually encouraging the practitioners to partake of non-nutritional experiences on many psychic levels. For example, Offred describes her dinner as a baked potato, green beans, salad, canned pears for dessert. It's good enough food, though bland. Healthy food, no coffee or tea though, no alcohol, 85. Here, encapsulated in a food metaphor, Atwood demonstrates the austerity of Puritanism. Forbidding sensual enjoyment, even of those foods that give nourishment, Puritanism supports a bland life. Thus, unsatisfied hungers become illicit and Offred dreams of hungers which cannot be indulged. For example, she tells us that in playing Scrabble, my tongue felt thick with the effect of spelling. It was like using a language that I'd once known but had nearly forgotten, a language having to do with customs that had long since passed out of this world. Café au lait at an outdoor table.
Okay, let's scroll up again. There it is. Okay.
With a brioche, absinthe in a tall glass, or shrimp in a cornucopia of newspaper, 199. Here,
Almost done.
Puritanism
I'm
has
thinking
offered food,
one more page
stones,
after
whereas
this.
the previous culture had allowed for sensual pleasures of the appetite. To emphasize how often these hungers go unfed, Offred employs synesthesia as a vehicle of expression. For example, in the games of Scrabble, wordplay becomes associated with sensual indulgence and hunger. I hold the glossy counters with their smooth edges, finger the letters. The feeling is voluptuous. The counters are like candies, made of peppermint, cool like that. I would like to put them into my mouth. They would also taste of lime. The letter C crisp, slightly acid on the tongue, delicious, 180. Hence, wordplay is seen as yet another appetite, and the proverbial, eating those words, 235, takes on new significance. In addition to providing a litany of hungers which Christianity neglects, Offred demonstrates that Christianity actually causes its practitioners to violate moral sanctions. By its constant deprivation of human desire, institutional Christianity actually encourages all of the cardinal sins itself. For example, Offred notes that in her house, we all envy each other something, 63, a clear statement of cause and effect. The old values, both of Victorian culture and biblical Christianity, have created the envy, the wrong feeling. Similarly, Offred wants to steal a knife, 126, as an act of rebellion against the suppression of her freedom. Most strikingly, she tells us that during her escape with Luke, she had to kill the cat in order to survive, 248. Here, animal murder is the direct effect of religious belief. Similarly, Offred must keep the match that she had been given by Serena Joy, 269, again with the intention of committing murder, here of the inhabitants and herself. In each instance, the institution of Christianity has created the occasion of sin. It has literally caused the sinfulness.
Yeah, she has several
Through
times where she
litany
tries
of
to
examples
commit
involving
murder
the
against
sinful
somebody else or
desires to which
herself.
Offred is subject, Atwood demonstrates the corrupting force of institutional Christianity. While churches are established to foster proper behavior and conduct, they have become the means of corruption. Denying the legitimacy of the human spirit, they have entrapped their practitioners in sinfulness, actually forcing them to acts of covetousness, adultery, or despair. As Offred says, I want anything that breaks the monotony, subverts the perceived respectable order of things, 300. Hence, forbidden the expression of natural feelings and appetites, Christians resort to sinning by way of rebellion. In a theological catch-22, they are then punished for the very acts which their religion has encouraged. With this understanding, Offred's statement associating God with an egg in the desert of life gains significance. In a lengthy, very Sufi-like passage, she conflates many of the ideas which are touched upon elsewhere. If institutional Christianity only offers stones for nourishment, life itself teaches otherwise. The shell of the egg is smooth but also grained. Small pebbles of calcium are defined by the sunlight, like craters of the moon. It's a barren landscape, yet perfect. It's the sort of desert the saints went into, so their minds would not be distracted by profusion. I think that this is what God must look like, an egg. The life of the moon may not be on the surface, but inside. 141. Continuing her theological speculation, Offred tells us that the egg is glowing now, as if it had energy of its own. She relishes its warmth and its good feelings. The egg is a pleasure for her, whereas, in reduced circumstances, she will seek out strange objects to survive instead. Thus, in this simple yet enigmatic passage, Offred shows how the secrets of life are hidden in simple objects, not in complicated discourses of biblical exegesis.
Okay, and let's see, are we done? Okay, we'll read up to where the notes are and then stop there. So, almost done.
Thus, in this simple yet enigmatic passage, Offred shows how the secrets of life are hidden in simple objects, not in complicated discourses of biblical exegesis. Her Sufi self has revealed the mysteries of her understanding and pronounced them in a simple yet profound metaphor. In The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood contrasts the barren landscape of Christianity with the fertile soil of Offred's imagination at night. Through her allusions to the Sufi tradition, Atwood offers alternative ethical understanding. Perhaps tongue-in-cheek, she anticipated that someone would uncover this very thing, for, in the historical notes section of her novel, Crescent Moon alludes to a paper entitled Krishna and Kali Elements in the State Religion of the Early Gilead Period, 380. However, the new Gilead has hidden the Sufi tradition so that only a careful attention to Offred's proverb-like narrative will illuminate it.
Okay.
Notes.
All right. That's enough of that. Okay. I am going to close the... Well, no, I don't want to close them because some of them are actually have other pages I was looking into. Not for this. Not for this. So, my kid's going into a physics degree, so I have been looking for physics colleges, and they want to go to Canada, so I've been looking for information on going to colleges in Canada and how much it costs and all of that. So fun. But anyway, let's see. Some of these I opened new, like this one, so I will be able to close. I thought about playing a little video or something, but not this time. Not today. Not today. Okay, let's go over to the book. All right, and that is it for today, for today's reading. Like I said, I was only doing the stuff before chapter 1, and this is chapter 1. So anyway, next time we do a reading section, I will start with chapter 1. I am not sure how far I'm going to go. Hopefully I will not be reading for 2 hours like I did today. I just had a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to read those articles and kind of give a little introduction to The Handmaid's Tale and to what I'm going to be doing, and that isn't exactly like what I will be doing. I will mostly be reading here, let me put this on live scene. I will be mostly reading the passages in this book, The Handmaid's Tale. Every once in a while, I may put in other thoughts and ideas. I may talk a little bit about the TV show. I may talk a little bit about the spin-off that's coming up based off Testaments, which the TV show is going to be called Testaments. I may talk a little bit about that, but mostly it's going to be reading. I do plan on putting an image up for each chapter to kind of, I don't know if it's to represent the chapter, but it should be an image that goes along with something in the chapter. So each chapter I'll put up one of those images. But if you are interested in that kind of thing, you want to go over the actual written text of The Handmaid's Tale, especially if you've watched the TV show but you haven't read the book, this could be a good way to go over it. Or even if you have read the book but it's been a while, I definitely think it is a book worth reading. And especially if you like dystopian novels. This is very dystopian. But yeah, I hope to see you next time. I do not have a specific schedule set up yet for doing these, but I think the most likely days that I will have available, because most of the days I'm going to be taking my kid to college classes, sometimes in the morning and the afternoon and evening, so it doesn't really leave me a lot of time. But I have Tuesdays and Fridays during the week, and I have the weekends that I will probably have a little more time to do extra stuff, so I might be able to do it. It depends on if I am keeping up with editing my reactions and my other live stream that I'm going to be starting. I will be starting to do live stream. I'll start with a live stream pre-watch and a reaction to some trailers of Night of the Seven Kingdoms before it starts. Just a little bit before it starts. But then after it starts, I'm going to start doing after show live streams. So if you are interested in that, you can take a look. I'll talk about some of the stuff that happened in the show, what I thought of it, some of my favorites and least favorites, best scenes, things like that. And if I am thinking of what might happen in future episodes, I may talk a little bit about some predictions or whatever, but it depends. Last time I tried to do something like that with Gen V, and I felt like most of the episodes, I was not doing very good at coming up with predictions for the coming episode. But I was, I think, doing a decent job of covering some of the stuff that happened in the episode and what I liked and disliked about it. So, if that's interesting to you, I will be starting that right before they start airing the show, which I think is January 18th. So January 18th is the first time it will be, it will drop here in Florida. That drops at night. The next week, I believe it's supposed to drop on Monday. So the 18th is a Sunday. The next week, it's supposed to drop on a Monday. And so my plan is to do after watches on either each Tuesday or Wednesday. Wednesday will be a little bit more difficult because I do have to bring my kid to morning and evening classes, but I'm pretty sure they do not have an afternoon class on Wednesday. They do have morning, afternoon, and evening classes on Monday. And I think Thursday they just have a morning class. But I still have to get editing done for my reactions. I still have to get other things ready. And after, I'm also going to start doing reactions for Bridgerton when it comes out. That comes out on the 29th of January. So it will be after it comes out that I try to put up a reaction. If I can get a hold of the first episode a little early and actually get a recording of the episode, I may be able to put an edited reaction to Bridgerton's first episode, Bridgerton season 4's first episode, like right after that, like on that Friday. But if I can't get something where I can actually record the episode, then it won't be able to be, it will take me a little while because it takes me a while to edit these things. So just keep that in mind. And once Bridgerton, and I'm also going to be taking a break from reactions to Gen V while I am doing Night of the Seven Kingdom and Bridgerton. So once those are over, I will try to put out the last couple episodes of Gen V. But I don't know, because I'm pretty sure there are 2 other shows coming up right after that, which is Testaments and Deadlock, I think. Let me double check my notes. I have it written down here. Yeah, so Testaments I think is supposed to start in April, and Deadlock is supposed to start in March. Well, so Deadlock's first. So Deadlock's supposed to start in March, and Testaments is supposed to start in April. And I am thinking I will probably do reactions to Testaments, and I'll do live stream either pre or post watch, pre or after watch live streams for Deadlock. But we'll see. I'm trying to keep it light. I still have Tokyo Ghoul Re that we're reacting to, me and my kid. And then once Tokyo Ghoul Re is done, I plan on doing another anime. So I need to keep it light because I got to get kid to school. I got to make sure I keep up with these appointments. Like I already missed an appointment today because I completely forgot about it. And I got to get the editing done on all these things. I got to do the recordings of the reactions and everything. and I am slowly trying to learn about DaVinci Resolve Studio version because I just got that this Christmas. Anyway, that is all I got for you today. I will see you when I see you.